my ears were telling me, like, no, I like this, you know, stop pretending you don't like this. I was too busy being a musical edgelord. The 1975 are a band from Wilmslow, Cheshire, England. Emphasis just on band, as frontman Matty Healy has expressed how he doesn't like being described as a rock band.
Instead, not that I'm in a rock band. I'm not in a rock band, I'm in a band. I hate rock band.
And I can get behind him not wanting to constrain himself to genre expectations. I would do the same. Forming in their secondary school as friends, the band, performing under a variety of different names during that time, eventually settled on the name The 1975 as a reference to the back of the Beatnik book On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Members of the band consist of Matty Healy on vocals, guitars and production, who was originally the drummer for the band. However, he took over on vocal duties as original singer Elliot Williams left to join the editors as the keyboardist. Also on guitar is Adam Hahn, on bass Ross MacDonald, on drums and also a writer and producer along with Matty Healy is George Daniel. Healy and Daniel have a close friendship, living only minutes away from each other.
You late? You're late!
And they've managed to retain creative control for themselves, as their manager Jamie Oborn had created the label Dirty Hit for the band. Coming from an upper middle class household, Healy, whose parents was on British TV, he describes his upbringing as being very comfortable, where house parties often got wild and he also met famous people. He says the 1975 are a production of middle class teenage boredom. Evident from following his lyrics, Healy has a fascination with illicit substances and has gone through his own opiate addiction, and he's been public about his time spent in the unique equine rehab.
Drugs have always been a big part of my life. I've always been fascinated with them, honestly, intellectually, socially, culturally. I've always found the idea of the desire to change the way that one feels a really interesting thing.
Did you keep it a secret from the other guys?
Yeah, for a long time. Well, I think George found me a couple of times, so he was just a bit like, bro, what the fuck? Because me and George are so close, we don't have those kind of boundaries.
Healy recalls 7 years of rejection before their EPs and debut broke out. Quote, "The reason it got hard was because we so knew who we were and what we wanted to do. Every major label came and heard our songs, and they all said, you don't know what you want to be." The band haven't yet had a single #1 in the charts yet, however they have 4 consecutive running #1 albums in the UK. 2018 saw the peak of their critical success upon the release of A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. Given the success of the band, not everyone is a fan. They exist somewhere between being considered the band to voice my generation to being incredibly overrated. I suppose that's the two-sided coin of success: popularity and then notoriety. Before getting into the research for this episode, I was aware there was a hardcore fan base for the band, and especially for frontman Matty Healy.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
On the flip side of that, I was aware that there's also people out there who are not fans of Matty Healy in particular, including some fans of the band who find it quite difficult to listen to the band because of him. So going into this episode, I did have a negative bias, where I was expecting to find something to dislike about Healy. However, after watching hours of interviews with him and the band, what I found was that he was passionate, charismatic, and could carry a conversation.
It's such an amazing thing to do as a band.
The 1975 were on my radar as soon as they released their debut. The radio were kind to them, playing their singles quite often, and they had their track The City, which was featured in FIFA 14, which I played probably way too much of. The kid next to me was used in their debut cover as his inspiration for his own graphic design work, and At that age, I don't think I was quite ready to get into the band, as I was 17 or 18. And what I was listening to back then were bands such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, The Clash, John Butler Trio, Bob Dylan and Streetlight Manifesto. Those were the bands that I was getting mostly into at that time. I believe I made the mistake of considering the band to be some sort of pop boy band, which couldn't be more further from the truth in reality. But back then I had so much of a musical identity complex where I had such an aversion to pop music. That would continue on years, just years, and I wouldn't come to listen to the band until they released A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. Oh, actually, I do tell a lie. I did catch quite a bit of their set at Glastonbury in 2016. My ears were telling me, like, you know, I like this, you know, stop pretending you don't like this. I was too busy being a musical edgelord. As a listener of music, I'm someone who has very low tolerance for repetition and overexposure to the same thing. If I hear something too often, then I will quickly grow to resent it, even if it's something that I really enjoy. If I hear it too much, then it can quickly grate on me to the point where I won't want to hear it ever again. And when I was playing FIFA 14, as much as I was, that was coming close to how I was feeling about the track The City, where, you know, it was a track that I didn't dislike. I thought it was a decent track. But after hearing it over and over and over again, it was one where I was like, I don't really want to hear this ever again. I also ran into a similar issue with Chocolate, which was a big hit here. It was on the radio quite a lot, and in the work playlist, it would be on once or twice a day. I gotta give credit to the song. It is one of them songs where it holds up so well that even with so much playtime and exposure to it, it's one of them where it can go just that bit further with how often you can hear it, because it's that good of a song. It's a bit like Under Pressure by David Bowie and Queen. You know, you can hear it like till the end of time and it'll still be great no matter how much you hear it. And then there's Sex, where I wasn't always a big fan of this song. So it's an iffy start to the album for me. But then there's the rest of the album, and this is where it really won me over. You've got tracks like Talk, which is one of my favourites. There's the interlude tracks with An Encounter. That is so hard to say for me. An Encounter. 12. And they offer a great service to the album in terms of providing ambient interludes, and it just works so well with the sequencing of the album. Tracks like Heart Out, Settle Down, Girls, She Way Out, they're all taken from the best elements of 80s pop. When the band members say they were going for an apocalyptic soundtrack for a John Hughes film set in the major key, I can totally see what they mean by that. And then there's the midway point ballad with Robbers, where Healy's described it as being the most naive moment of the band so far, with like the lyrics like, "When everybody's dead." You know, it's just so over the top and emo, and it's just as good as it gets. I really enjoy the electronically produced tracks with Money and Menswear, where they show they got some chops for the electronic production, and the way they sequenced it is really great as well. It really makes the entire album flow because of it. Pressure is the penultimate track to the album, and I'm a really big fan of this one, as the idea of changing pressure with the song itself. It feels like it's taking the entire album and letting the listener know the album's now soon over, and we're changing the tempo, we're changing the attitude to where we were before. It's get ready guys, it's nearly all over. And then we follow through into the album closer, Is There Someone Who Can Love You, which stands out again, where it's a quiet piano driven closer. It's as classic as you can get from an album closer. A lot of bands tend to use this trick, and I have to say I am very partial to it. I can see why it's so popular to do, and it works for me. So overall, this album, despite the iffy start, I gotta say, after 3 or 4 listens, I was completely sold on this album, and I consider it to be a really, really strong debut in anyone's record discography. I would say they should be proud to have this one as their debut. I decided to go with the special limited edition version, which is on white vinyl, released by HMV, limited to 1975 copies. Wasn't aware HMV is still going. Hang in there, boys. Seemed to be worth it, considering all of the other limited to a small amount of copy versions of records that I've bought seem to go up in value very quickly once they go out of print. It feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity, because if you're going to do 1975 copies, then would it have been that hard to have done a numbered release? So each of the 1975 copies got a number on the back. Just adds a little bit of more novelty to it. On the front and back covers are the featured iconography using the signature box shape that the band like to use. It's used with a neon sign for the band's name and the title tracks at the back. The black and white aesthetic would follow through into their music videos also. It's a 212-inch release for this LP, so we have a gatefold for it, which is very, very nice, and it's in very good quality. On the inside of the gatefold, we have a photograph of the band members, and I'm usually not really a fan of these kinds of band photographs. It reminds me of Faith Plus One. It's just become very outplayed at this point. What they've done with the colour actually is that they do have some blue left in the colour, so it's not completely black and white by the looks of it to my eyes. It's a panoramic photograph and 2-page spread, but with the black bars at the top and bottom. It works sort of like a CinemaScope aspect ratio, and it makes it seem like it's more cinematic as a result. On the inner sleeve artwork, there's a continuation of this blue filter. What I get from this is that the band are creating imagery which is expanding on the aesthetic of this idea that they're trying to put across of like this world that they've created in their music, where, you know, these are just a bunch of middle class, really young guys in their 20s at this point, but the way they're creating this mythology using this music and the whole photography that they've got going on here, it's very cinematic, it's very gritty. You know, they got writing on mirrors and walls. It's got that young and rebellious attitude to it. There's people passed out on the floor, there's chains on gates, there's crosses, there's rough looking photos with like this nostalgic element to it. There's a lot going on here. As usual, I've added in Naga sleeves to give extra protection, because otherwise it's just paper scratching up against your records, and that's never nice. Now, where do I begin with this? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It looks so bloody good. And another bonus thing with this is that if there is any dirt on it, then it's just really easy to spot and you can clean it off really quickly. On disc 1, a very small amount of crackle is present, only audible during the intro track. Other than that, it sounds indistinguishable from an MP3 with no general surface noise. On disc 2, a couple of pops were heard. During some quieter moments, crackle and standalone clicks could be heard, but overall it's a very good copy. I can only speak for my own copy of this limited edition, as I haven't seen any other reviews regarding it. However, with the original UK European release for the clear vinyl version, there have been known to be some quality control issues, so do take that into consideration if you're looking to buy this debut. Simply put, this is a fantastic album. It's like a modern day So by Peter Gabriel, and the opening track, Love Me, is like a weird mix-up of INXS and then an Adrian Belew-led King Crimson. Of all, like, the comparisons I could have made, I wouldn't have thought King Crimson with 1975 would be one of them, but there you have it. I've been so worried about you lately. Change of Heart showcases Healy at his most casual and conversational with his lyrics. The production on She's American is fantastic. I love the quick palm muted riff. Reverby A7 sus4 chord. The drumming is right in the pocket. It's just an amazing A-side. Side B, we have the soulful If I Believe You. There's the sparkly Please Be Naked. Which sounds like it could have been off of Valtari by Sigur Rós, which I know the band are really into. And then there's the shoegazy Lost My Head. Which is inspired by Ride's Vapor Trail. Which, come on, I mean, anyone who hears Vapor Trail is inspired by it. The Ballad of Me and My Brain. It's one of my favourite moments on the album, when Healy just goes for it with all the grit in his voice. It's just a brilliant closer to side B. Side C is where the tempo shifts gear for the midpoint on the album, where we have tracks which are slower. And I feel like this is where they make the first mistake by putting the sound at the end of this side, as it just sticks out for me, where the tempo isn't consistent. And as we go on to side D, we're shifting from being slower tempo to then having the sound, which is, you know, a banger in its own right. But then you go to side D and the album's closing down and it just feels so out of place to me. So changing it with a Change of Heart from side A, where it would have fit perfectly in place of where the sound is, it would have just made all sense to me to have done that. So as mentioned, side D is also great. You've got the lush This Must Be My Dream. Is anyone else hearing Every Breath You Take on Paris? The acoustic riff on Nana feels like it's the best use of an acoustic guitar that the band have done even to this date now. Also listen out for the upright bass in the song, it sounds fantastic. And then the final track, She Lays Down, which is a complete switch up in the production style on the album, where it feels, well, it definitely seems like it's just one take with Matty. And then how it is just a total juxtaposition from how you've got all of this glitzy production on all of the other tracks, and then when suddenly you have this track about his mum's postnatal depression, which is such a hard-hitting topic of all things to end on, and then how there's just more impact being brought in on it because of that removal of all this production around it, and then suddenly is just nothing but the topic and the theme of the song that you're left with, and it just works so well because of it. So for this one we actually have, well, it's the same, apart from it's pink and white instead of black and white. And this idea was actually taken from Tumblr fan art, which the band came across and they liked it, so they went with it. So no more gloomy, moody band member photos on the inside of this one. Instead we have moody photos of neon signs with the track names put into interesting locations, and I really dig it. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. For the inner sleeve artwork, they've kept it really clean, very minimal, and it looks gorgeous. I'm not jealous of this being clear rather than white for this one. I think the clear works really well with the pink and white that they've got going on with the labels. I'm going to praise the design of the label once again. The attention that they've put to it, I just love it, where they've got the album title going round in a circle around the label. It looks so good. And once again, I've added in my own Naga sleeves for protection. On side 1, after the intro track, I couldn't tell the difference between the MP3 and the vinyl that I was switching back and forth between. On side 2, unfortunately, surface noise is present throughout, with Please Be Naked suffering the most as it is the quietest track where you can hear those defects the most. It's not great, but it could be a lot worse. On side 3, crackle is present, only during the quieter moments, such as on tracks like I Like It When You Sleep. And then on side 4, I heard the first pop on Nana, and I heard surface noise during She Lays Down, again because it is a quieter track. Overall, while my copy isn't the best, it's not enough to deter me from giving it a spin.
Go down, soft sound.
A Brief Inquiry explores themes of technology's roles in our day-to-day lives with each other, and this is expressed immediately with the vocal post-processing on the intro track, and it feels more than ever like it is a computer system booting up. I believe that's what they were going for on all of the intro tracks in a way, but this one feels like a computer booting up like no other. Next up is Give Yourself a Try, and with the sharp riff it plays a little bit like binary again, where its signal is either on or it's off. The riff is taken from Joy Division's Disorder, which is a great track. But I gotta admit, I wasn't immediately sold on this when I heard it, even for the first like 5 or 6 times. It took a while to grow on me, but it's kind of the same for all the rest of this album. It took me a lot of listens in some of these tracks to grow on me, but eventually it really did. Especially the jazzier tracks such as Sincerity is Scary and Mine. Gorgeously written tracks, just fantastically produced too. And then you've got tracks like The Man Who Married a Robot, dash Love Theme? Yeah, Love Theme. Where that one plays like it's a Black Mirror modern version of The Police's Sally, and then Surrounded by Heads and Bodies, where I really now see the quality in the song. I love the airiness to it.
But I only got it one time, maybe it was 2 times, don't think it was 3 times, didn't mean it 2 time, yeah.
2 Time was such a key track for me to get around to enjoy, as The vocal post-processing used on this track, it was the first case that I came across where I was really taken aback by it, as I kind of felt like any vocal post-processing was used as a way to cheat because you couldn't sing, and it was just frowned upon really in what I assumed. But then I found that the song was just so good. The melody was so good. I just wanted to listen to it more and more. It was such a guilty pleasure as I was hearing it. And then eventually I really came around to it, and it completely changed my mind on vocal post-processing, where instead of it being a detractor by default, I really saw it as an instrument in itself where it could be used for benefiting the artist and giving it like another tool in their toolbox to play with, really. And it was really important, as with tracks like How to Draw a Petrichor coming up, and then I Like America and America Likes Me, which is like Two Time but on steroids. Love It If We Made It has an intense drive to it, and the resolution that it comes to at 2 minutes and 11 seconds is the band at their peak. And also listen out for that bass. Then we run into some tracks such as Be My Mistake, Inside Your Mind, and I Couldn't Be More in Love. They're skippers for me. Be My Mistake, I just don't find it captures my attention. It's completely forgettable. Inside Your Mind, it's just very sluggish, and it's just a straight up skipper for me. And then I Couldn't Be More in Love is possibly the band's worst song in my opinion. I'm not a fan of the instrumental. It just doesn't fit the band for me, and especially the end key change. Key changes are very rare for them to work on me ever, and this is definitely not a key change that works at all for me. It was the music video for It's Not Living If It's Not With You which got me into the band completely, as at that point I'd gotten really big into Talking Heads, absolutely adoring their live show, Stop Making Sense. It made me open up my eyes completely to the rest of what the band had done at this point. So this was the point where I thought, you know, I gotta see what these guys are up to. I Always Want to Die, sometimes. I love the name of that track. It's such a great name. And it's a great grandiose closer to the album. It had help from David Campbell, who is, fun fact, Beck's dad, who also did the orchestral arrangement for Goo Goo Dolls' Iris. I'm also hearing a bit of Feeder's Feeling the Moment in this one with the chorus for this track. All in all, A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships is such a close one for being vinyl worthy. If it wasn't for them 3 tracks, then it would be vinyl worthy for me. But you know what the rules for a vinyl worthy album are. I can't have a skippable track. And unfortunately, while I rate this album very, very, very highly, it's a great album. It's just not a vinyl worthy album, I'm afraid. The band go in quite a few different directions on this 22-track, 1 hour, 20-minute album. From some hardcore to some country to some orchestral pieces to some shoegaze to some jungle pop, electronic. The band are playing with it all here, and some mostly great results which I really enjoy throughout. I'm hearing some more Burial, some more Brian Eno, Sigur Rós and John Hopkins on tracks like Music for Cars, Bagsy Not in the Net, Having No Head, Streaming. They're all great tracks. However, there are just a few tracks again that I don't like and I skip, so again, it's not a vinyl worthy album for me. However, 22 tracks, yeah. I'd be more surprised if it was vinyl worthy. While I find Greta Thunberg to be iconic as a person and I really respect her and everything that she does, and I find her presence on the opening on this album is powerful, I think it will age really well. However, I just don't see the instant replay value for this, as if I'm going to be listening through it, it's over 4 minutes the track, and I just don't see it as being an enjoyable piece of music. It's got a really nice bed scored underneath it, but hearing the monologue that Greta gives, it's just not musical. Sorry. People is the heaviest track by the band so far, and it reminds me of Negative Creep by Nirvana off their debut Bleach, and then New Noise by Refused. Despite having great influences, it just doesn't compare, and I even skip it. Some of the standout tracks for this album for me are tracks like Yeah I Know and Shiny Collarbone. I feel like they're taken right out of Jamie XX's next album, which I'm sure if when he hears it, he's gonna be like, oh, damn it. He's like, damn it, that should have been mine. Despite being very late to the party on the 1975, I still find myself having a real great time listening to them. Maybe it is the honeymoon phase of first getting into them, time will tell, but for now I have to say they are probably my favourite contemporary artist that I'm currently listening to right now.